Hey, what's going on, guys? Have a knife review for you today. This is a little double feature just because both these knives are identical other than the front scale on this model, having some texturing to it, which is pretty cool. Talk about that in a little bit. But as a quick note, I want to thank everyone who had recommended that I put my cell phone in airplane mode so you don't get the beep boop 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 noise, whatever it happens to make. I do keep my cell phone by me at all times in case there's an emergency or something, someone needs to call me. But I know occasionally there'll be some interference with the camcorder and you get all kinds of beeping and buzzing and stuff. So hopefully that fixes that. So thanks for that little tip. All right, so we're looking at two Schrade models. These are new Schrade. All right, so these are coming from overseas under the Taylor brand, or Taylor Cutlery brand. First one we have is the, well, that's the second one. The first one we have is the SCH 301, which is the plain version, and the SCH 302. So here's the boxes you're gonna get. There's a lot of the new Schrades come in this this box. Kind of no frills, just says Schrade. Paperwork you're gonna get is just vague paperwork that comes with pretty much all the Schrade stuff right now. And I believe I already showed this in the last knife I did from Taylor Cutlery. So just generic paperwork on the maintenance of a knife and limited warranty, stuff like that. So no frills on that. All right, let's get into it. So we have two knives here. Like I said, the only difference is the handle. So let's talk about that first. Get that out of the way. We have the plain one, which is fine, functional. Ergonomics on this knife overall is really good. I like it, no complaints at all. However, the textured version, the 302, I like even more. It's just a very light texture. You can see it's not very deep or anything. But it does add a little something something. It's hard to explain. It doesn't add grip. It's not like, okay, this is much more grippy and this is slick. It's nothing like that at all. It's more or less just the overall feel is nicer. It feels good. Obviously your fingers wrap around. Any kind of texturing on your front scale will be where your fingers are touching, so you will feel it. It'll be very positive to you. I just like overall how this feels a little bit more. As far as looks, that's definitely up to personal feelings and opinions. I like the look of the texture one just because it's different. There's so many knives, not to take away from it, but there's so many knives that are just plain. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just plain. So if you give me something a little bit different that I happen to like this will definitely be my preference, although both function identically. All right, so I'm going to show this mostly up front. I'll keep this in the background if you don't look at. All right, so some specs on this thing, because I have to tell you all about the specs. As far as size, I would say medium, possibly large folding knife. Blade is 3.7 inches long. The steel is a 9CR18 MOV. We've heard all the different variants on this series of steel. Performance to me is still very much in between like 440C and AUS 8. It's going to be in the softer range of steels. The pros, once again, having a softer steel, or cheaper steel as well, because generally speaking, some of the softer stuff is cheaper. The pros are ease of sharpening. You can get a pretty nice edge on it. So ease of maintenance, pretty much. The cons, obviously, is going to be it will dull faster than some of the expensive steels. But for a $20 to $25 knife, which both of these are, that's your price range, $20 to $25. It performs very nicely, very nicely. And one thing that I mentioned in another video is that these both these knives, as well as all the other stuff that came directly from Schrade, the new Schrade stuff, was razor sharp, razor sharp. I was not expecting the quality level of the factory edge. Let me put it that way. I had very low expectations for the edge to arrive sharp. I was kind of expected to open these up and try them out and immediately sharpen them so I could actually use them. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that these did come very sharp out of the box. Ripped through cardboard like nobody's business. It does have a thicker stock to it, all the ones in the 300 series. So you do have a fatter or wider grind. Okay, here's our stock right here. So being that the grind starts about 50% down the blade, you have a kind of a wedge action. So our edge or our grind is a lot thicker than normal. Most pocket knives of this size, these folders, they're going to be a thinner, thinner grind as opposed to this. So it's a little bit more of a wedge. So you feel that a little bit in performance when you're cutting into something, even though these were razor sharp, it'll start ripping through cardboard, but you feel the resistance. It's not because the knife is dull, it's just because the knife has a wide grind on it. So you could see that as a negative as far as performance overall. It's just part of this particular design. If they were to, you know, obviously do a full flat grind or something like that, it'd be a little bit different, but it's just not the case. Tanto, the secondary point was pretty pointy. I didn't really, you know, damage it much during use. I didn't round it or anything. This is pretty much what it looked like when the knife was brand new. None of these came with a super pointy point. I find that to be the case on most affordable knives and or cheaper knives coming from overseas, is that not a lot of them have a super fine point on them. Just a very small attention to detail. But if you can kind of tap your finger like that on the point, it's not that pointy. On a super pointy knife, it would stick into your finger. So you do have a slightly dulled tip, I would say, from factory. I know that this wasn't personally from use. I didn't do a whole lot of tip testing because I want to use these and abuse these, just one of them anyway, to see what kind of where its breaking point is. So I'm gonna do a lot of testing in the future. You're gonna see with you know, stabbing and stuff like that, particularly with the Tanto, since that's been touted as such a superior design for penetration and stuff. So we'll do some testing like that in the future on this particular, well, not maybe this one. I like this one more, so possibly this one. Anyway, we'll figure that out in the future. But I did want to mention it out of the box, not quite as pointy as many other knives. So, the handle is 4.9 inches long, and this entire knife is titanium coated stainless, okay? So you have like a tinitride coating. It's what allows us to have this straight gray coloring, but also is going to protect the stainless slightly. So as far as our blade, not as much rust issues. Of course, your exposed edge will be like any other stainless, so you want to just maintain it like you normally would, very light oiling, stuff like that. But it does add a little something something to the knife overall. The overall length is 8.6 inches, and here comes the weight, because if you haven't seen these before or saw my other video, these things are heavy. This knife weighs 10.6 ounces. It's a brick. It is a brick. And both of the, even though there's a little bit of texturing on this one also weighs 10.6 ounces. Doesn't take away or add to the weight at all. 10.6 ounces. Are you kidding me? Now, for most, that's going to be a downside. And I can tell you, when I EDC'd this knife, I EDC'd it for 2 weeks. I knew it was there every second of every single moment it was in my pocket. It is like a brick, particularly because I carry a lot of other stuff, having a firearm on my person, having, you know, miscellaneous things like, you know, my keys, of course, my cell phone, my flashlight, whatever other tools I happen to be carrying, sometimes a multi-tool. It's a lot. It is definitely a lot. If you're not scared off by the massive weight of this huge hunk of steel, because everything's overbuilt on this. We have much thicker scales than are necessary, a thicker blade stock than is necessary, but with that you actually get durability. You really do have a very hard use Foley knife, and for a $20 to $25 price tag, I think that's excellent. There's not a whole lot on the market this can compare to directly, as far as being so beefy and ridiculously overbuilt. But that's been the theme. It's been the theme in the industry. I've seen it the last couple months, over the last year. A lot of these, especially custom knives, you're seeing them bigger and fatter and chunkier and just overbuilt. Speaking of overbuilt, something I'm going to mention, I think I mentioned in the other video as well on the 300 series in general, is this lock bar stabilizer. Now this is a fantastic thing. It's very cool, and this has also been very trendy. You know, obviously you would think we've all saw them in the Rick Hinderer knives first. And then we've seen a lot of other companies now, I mean custom guys or custom knives putting these on their frame locks. Now we're seeing production companies use these on their frame locks. I think I saw Kershaw has a couple models with the lock bar stabilizer. It's a trendy thing. It's something, you know, obviously when you see something occur in the market and the consumers like it, the buyers, the people that are going to be purchasing the knives, they like it. Other people say, hey, you know what? Maybe we should do that. So it becomes trendy. It's a trendy thing. But here's my opinion on the lock bar stabilizer. First off, if you don't know, its function is basically to block the lock bar right here, our frame lock, from going too far. Essentially, that's all it is. It's to prevent you pushing it too far, because if you did push it too far, you could bend the bar itself, and it would not lock up properly. Okay, it makes complete sense, and it's a very functional piece. But as I mentioned in the other video, way before lock bar stabilizers were here, when the frame lock design was first created, I can't even tell you how many hundreds of frame locks that I've personally handled, not personally owned, but at least handled. I have never once, since the induction of the frame lock design, have I ever overextended a frame lock. I've never frame bar or frame bar, no, a lock bar. I've never pushed it too far. That's basically what I'm saying, is I've always just used just enough tension, because I'm putting tension on the back of the blade, so okay, hey, it's unlocked. I can stop pushing now. My brain works properly in allowing me to stop pushing this bar because it's no longer necessary. I can close my blade. Just like the other video, I want you to personally comment down below if you've ever overextended or hyperextended your lock bar on a frame lock. If you have, you need one of these, but I would say most of us, if not every single person watching, probably never has an issue with it. That being said, I still think it's cool. I still think that it's a very nice addition. It's a fine detail. Overall, it gives you this specific look that the market is going for right now. It's very tactical looking. It's very cool. Is it completely necessary? Absolutely not. I really don't think it's necessary at all. I don't think it'll ever be necessary. But for some reason, it's still cool. And for some reason, I really like it. I really do. And on these, if you haven't seen, there's a guy on YouTube, Sherman614. Little shout out to him once again, Dan. He does some custom work where he takes, fired cartridges of like 9mm, whatever the diameter happens to be for the specific lock bar stabilizers, but he'll actually replace them. So it adds a nice little custom touch, a little detail you can do. So you can go to him if you want something like that. If you're a gun guy, you want a little bullet, like the rim of the casing for your lock bar stabilizer. So it adds a little something, something. Necessary? No, not at all, but still cool. Speaking of the frame lock, here's the lockup on this particular one, and it's very late. This, to me, I'm telling you because you want to hear it, but personally, I've talked this before too. I can care less if my lock bar for a frame lock is 5%, 80%, doesn't matter to me one bit. That's another thing. I've never personally worn out a lock to the point where it was completely over 100% and was a problem, put it that way. I've had knives where I've worn the lock or the tang down or the lock bar enough where it was 100% lockup, but it wasn't a problem where it jammed the knife up. In other words, the lock bar was completely over, it was 100%, but it still locked the knife and there was still no blade play. By the way, both of these knives, these lock up like a friggin' bank vault. It's ridiculous. There's no blade play, and I'm really moving these things around, or trying to anyway. And I have used this one particularly very hard. This one, not so much. Here's a lockup on this. It's a little bit earlier. I compare them directly to each other. So you see, just like you would expect from some of the cheaper and or more affordable knives, you have inconsistencies. There are slight inconsistencies, okay? Which means when you're buying a cheaper knife, 10 out of 10 times, it's somewhat of a crapshoot. Overall, having 4 different knives from the 300 series, like I say, they're all very acceptable, but there are minute differences in quality, such as there's a hole in the blade here, which, as far as my knowledge, it's aesthetic. It doesn't serve a specific purpose. It's just for looks. But on the textured version, coming nice and close, we could see we have a little bit of a wee-wah, kind of a loop-de-doo, what happened there. Whereas with this one, it's perfectly straight. So you just have a little inconsistency in the overall quality. As I've also mentioned, this one was a little bit rough out of the box. This one was nice and smooth when I first got it. But I did the little, polishing job myself in the pivot to make this one nice and smooth. This one, of course, after my own little work, is even smoother than the other one. But there's another inconsistency where this one's just not quite as smooth out of the box. This is very much to be expected across the board with anything that's going to be cheaper. Okay, this is kind of what you're paying for when you buy a really expensive knife. All these little details, the fact that the quality is very consistent. So let's say, I don't know what specifically to name, but let's say we have this high-end knife, right? If you bought this high-end production knife or this high-end custom knife from someone, and then your friend wants one and they buy it, they should be identical. They should both be very high quality. Whereas with the cheaper stuff, because they're maybe more mass produced or there's slightly less attention to detail during the manufacturing process, you will get these inconsistencies like that. How smooth is the pivot? How smooth is the action? You know, how exactly does the lock bar lock up? Stuff like that. You know, the little tiny hole. This one's perfect, that one's not. Is it going to affect the performance of the knife? Absolutely not. As far as the lock bar is concerned, yeah, they're a little bit different, but they both lock up perfectly. There's no up and down. There's no side to side either, which I really like. Particularly, this one I fixed myself, but this one out of the box, there's no side to side at all. However, it's still nice and smooth. The action is really smooth. For a $20 knife, it's ridiculous. Now, it is a very heavy blade, so you need a little bit of a wrist thing going on here for the flipper. And for the thumb stud, maybe not as much because it's more technique. But very, very smooth with no blade play. When you're talking about a $20 knife, most of them will have some kind of side to side in order to get it smooth enough where it will flick out very nicely. So, very impressive as far as that's concerned. Let's talk a little bit about the pocket clip and carry options. Neither one of these knives have a lanyard hole, okay? The other knives in the 300 series, which I'm going to review in a separate video, they do have a lanyard hole on these, okay? But these don't have a flipper. So it's just a different overall style as far as how you may or may not want to carry them. But these do not have a lanyard. So keep that in mind, you're carrying a heavier knife with no lanyard hole option. Also, something that I know a lot of you guys want to know because some of you won't like it, some of you won't care. I personally don't care. But this is positioned with a pocket clip that's tipped down only. You can see it's not tapped or anything. There's no way to swap this pocket clip anywhere else in the knife. This is how you have it. It's tipped down, right hand carry only. Also, you can see where it carries. So it's not a deep carry or concealed carry by any means. But at the same time, having a heavier knife like this, I don't mind. I like having a little something to hold on to. When I take this out of the pocket, it gives me enough to grip onto to take it out. Now, I've talked about this before. Most of you guys do prefer a tip-up carry, basically for two reasons. The biggest reason, from what I've heard from your feedback, is for general safety. If you have a tip down, you can see that the blade is facing the inside of the pocket, and a lot of you guys feel like it could open up. You could reach down to grab something and pull back if it's open just a little bit. You know, you're gonna cut yourself, stab yourself. I get that. That's a safety concern. So you prefer a tip up because your blade is up against the seam of your pocket. Totally understand that. But the other thing, although minor, people will say they don't like a tip down because when they go to grab their knife, it's backwards. Well, that's just positioning. That's all. I very much accustom myself to certain types of knives that I like and prefer. But as you guys know, I carry so many different knives. There's tip up, tip down, and just all these different variants on it that I have to easily and quickly adjust between all these different types of knives and how I take it out of my pocket. So for tip down knives like this, where I don't have the option to change it, it's very simple. Instead of an overhand grip, I just come in straight down. So I come in with these fingers, pull it out, so now I'm in the position I need to be to open the knife. So it's just a user changing how he grabs his knife. But, you know, I still understand. A lot of you guys still have a concern with that. As much as you like a knife, you really just will not buy a tip-down knife. That's unfortunate. I think you're missing out, but I totally understand why. But that is definitely notable. The pocket clip itself is fine. By design, the tension, everything's great on it. Kind of random with the, you know, how it goes on. There's no specific design to it, really. It kind of wraps around the pivot. Just a little bit random. You find that with a lot of cheaper knives. I think it's more about availability. They happen to, you know, company, and this is just total, like, assumption on my part. There's no fact behind this, just my assumption. When you talk about cheaper knives, when you're making a couple thousand of them at a time, you say, hey, we got this pocket clip. Okay, we'll just make it work. As opposed to designing a pocket clip specific to one type of knife. This same exact pocket clip might be on 3 or 4 different models just to save costs, just to have it across the board, a little bit universal. So that's why I find on cheaper knives, they do have more of a random pocket clip pattern that doesn't necessarily go with the knife. But it's completely functional. It functions fine, didn't tear the pocket or anything. There's just enough of a lip here to get it in and out easily. No kind of wear whatsoever. Speaking of wear and ergonomics in general, it is a very ergonomic knife. You can see how we have a kind of a loose U shape here. If you had really, really big hands, you might have a problem with this type of design because it could dig into your finger. I have fairly large hands, but I don't have big old banana mitts or anything, or banana hands. So I always combine things. I don't know why. It's either banana hands or big mitts, but I made it banana mitts for some reason. That's how my brain works, I guess. If you have huge hands, it may be a consideration as far as ergonomics. But I would say large all the way down to little tiny child hands would be just fine for you. But even though ergonomics are very nice on this, what I did like a little touch, and sometimes you won't see this on cheaper knives, and this is a hit on a different knife I'm going to review in the future, is that this is rounded. All right, not specifically rounded. They actually just did like a 45-degree angle, but you can see all the edges are angled for comfort, so you don't have an abrupt, sharp edge. Okay, having that cut in there greatly increases the comfort of for the user to hold this knife, and even in the reverse grip, it's still very comfortable. Fits the hand very nicely. I'm going to be using this a lot because I'm doing a lot of stabbing with this in the future. Well, this one. But yeah, ergonomics are pretty good on this. I like it. On all four of these ones from the 300 series for the Schrade stuff, the lock bar doesn't have any kind of cutouts in it. Sometimes, you know, right here where you're going to be constantly, you know, unlocking the knife, there's half moon shapes cut into it, there's scalloping, there's jimping, there's all kinds of stuff. It doesn't have anything at all, and it doesn't need anything at all. It's very easy to get to that. It's fine. Some people prefer knives with some kind of a cutout here, so it's easier to get to that. Totally unnecessary. It really is. When you're using a knife, the last thing you want to do is accidentally unlock it. So I think having something this design where there is no cutouts is probably beneficial, if anything, for safety. But that's pretty much it. Construction is Torx, as you saw. I took one of these apart to show you the inside. That's another thing too, is this one has a back spacer as opposed to the other 300 series knife, which is a flow-through design. Talk about that more in that review. But there is a back spacer here. It's just some kind of composite. I don't know exactly what it is, but just some type of plastic. But again, with inconsistencies, when I took, I believe it was this one that I took apart on camera, you could see that the hole into the back spacer for this, even though the back spacer lines up fine with the knife, the hole kind of half went into it. Again, tiny detail for a cheaper knife. Whereas I took this one apart and the holes lined up perfectly. So again, it goes along the same theme of slight inconsistencies. Does it affect how the knife works? Absolutely not. But if you're a perfectionist or something, then this is going to be something that might bother you a little bit. It's kind of somewhat of a grab bag. Although it is a grab bag, I still think it's very much worth taking the risk for 20 bucks. Like I said, 20, 25 bucks, what these are going for. I like them. I really like them. If you're looking for something that's overbuilt but affordable, you're probably going to like the Schrade 300 series in general. But specifically the 301 and 302, I'm a big fan of. If you do want a combo edge, I believe, don't quote me, but I believe at least one of these versions does have a combo edge that's available. But I would always prefer a plain edge just for ease of sharpening. Just my personal experience. So that's it. That's my review of the Schrade 301 and the Schrade 302 tactical folding knife. They are definitely worth giving it a try if you can overcome that weight. But keep in mind, 10.6 ounces is extremely, extremely heavy for this size folding knife. You can easily carry 2, 3, or possibly even 4 knives of this size for the same weight. So something to keep in mind. That's pretty much my biggest hit on it. But besides that, it's definitely a home run. It's a very, very cool knife for the price. So I hope you guys enjoy the review. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.